Hey everybody, welcome to the QuiverCast.
You go left, I go right. Man, this wave is out of sight. Going surfing, going surfing, going surfing with friends.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the QuiverCast. And we have the number one surf coach, Martin Dunn here. How are you, Martin?
Yeah, well, thanks, Mike. Yeah, pretty good. Nice and early in Australia right now, but yeah, I'm happy to have a chat.
Thank you for coming on the show. I'm super stoked. So, I guess I'll start at the beginning. You are super famous surf coach, but before you were a surf coach, you had to love surfing, right? How'd you get into surfing?
I started surfing when I was about 10 or 11. My sister had a boyfriend who was a surfer back in the late 60s, early 70s. So I tried his board and I think I stood up the first time on a wave in that session. You know, once it hooks you, once surfing hooks you, it hooks you. And so my dad bought me a surfboard, you know, that Christmas, just a backyard job, but it floated and it paddled and single fin. And anyway, so I started doing it. I suppose the reason why I'm still in the sport in a meaningful way is that in those days I had to hitchhike to the beach to get to the beach. And so for 4 or 5 years, the only way I could get to the beach was a hitchhike. So I hitchhiked to the beach, hitchhiked with a couple of mates. And, you know, those experiences, that effort to get to the beach just makes you keener to be a surfer. When you got there, you surf no matter what. And that still is with me today. I love being around surfing. I love being around surfers, and I'm fortunate enough that's my job, where I work with surfers in a meaningful way.
The hitchhiking, how was that back in the day? Was it safe?
Oh, well, I didn't know whether it was safe or not. You know, it was the only way. It was a means to an end. You know, you got picked up by all sorts of people. There's a couple of times in that experience that I got picked up, and I'm lucky to have survived, more from a dangerous driving point of view rather than feeling like I was being targeted as a, you know, child sex victim, you know.
Yeah.
You know, back in the day, everything was in Australia anyway. It was pretty cool, you know. Like, people didn't worry about those things. The biggest issue I had, I tell you, Mike, was that we used to hitchhike with our surfboards, and hitchhiking with your surfboards wasn't always easy.
Right.
You know, so a lot of cars went past because they couldn't fit your board in. And
Yep.
so what we decided to do was, me and a mate, we decided to leave our boards in the bush, hide them in the bush, so that when we came out to the beach, we had a place we could hitchhike much more easily. Anyway, this weekend we got out to the beach, and there'd been a bushfire go through.
Oh,
No.
no.
Like a forest fire, as you say in the States. So there we are. We pulled up, and they were just, you know, destroyed. The fins were intact, but they were the only part.
Shoot.
Then we had to go back to hitchhiking with boards once we got boards again. So that was the only real issue with it, and you know, and fond memories as well. You know,
100%. It shaped the way you are, probably, in your life
without
today.
doubt. Yeah, one of those things that shaped you for sure.
What was the local spot you were going to? Where were you surfing?
The main place I went to was a place called Saltwater Point. There's a right-hand point break in Australia on the east coast from say, Sydney up to Queensland, which is around about a 10, 12-hour drive. There's a right-hand point break every 100 Ks, every 100 miles. You know, Saltwater Point, where I grew up, you can get a ride, probably 200-meter ride on a good wave, and you know, so it's not a world-class point, but it's a point, you know.
Right.
And you know, and then you got Crescent Head, which is famous for longboarding. That's the next major one. Then Scott's Head, and then Arrawarra, and then, you know, Ngari and Lennox Head and Byron Bay, and then all the points in Queensland. So, you know, I'm very fortunate to have grown up in an area where they had a point, because a lot of places haven't got them. And so, you know, you got beach breaks and a point break, and really blessed to be able to do that. And you know, in Australia, we're very, very, very lucky that we've got all these great waves, and everyone gets into the vibe. You know, point breaks are like having a wave pool in your backyard. You know,
Yeah.
they're not as consistent, but they're just as much fun.
Of course. Was it crowded?
No, back in the day, it wasn't crowded. No, you get probably 20 or 30 guys out. You know, there's always a constant level of crowd, and these are the local people, and then people driving through. Sydney was the main metropolitan area in Australia. It was about 5-hour drive south. What people used to do back then was they used to jump in their cars and they do road trips up the coast. or they do road trips down the coast from Sydney. Where I was is regional New South Wales. It had a surfing population of maybe 50 surfers in the region, and then the other people in the water were people who were driving past and the like. So it wasn't crowded. Midweek, there was no one, there might be 10 people in the water.
Nice.
Then you'd have the holiday season and you get busy, and not like today.
Yeah.
It's a lot more different today.
And you being a Grom, was it hard to get waves, or was it the older guys welcoming?
No, early on yeah, you could get waves and that, but yeah, no, early on you had your place. You weren't on the peak. You gradually worked your way up the pecking order. Just like any surf break, you work your way in, and when you feel you're ready and the crowd feels you're ready, they let you get a few waves. But again, it wasn't a problem because there wasn't a lot of people. In my experience, you were told in no uncertain terms that if you did the wrong thing, they'd tie you to a tree, or they do certain stuff to you. Again, that's another shaping thing that you have, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Is that gone today?
It has somewhat. Yeah, yeah. You don't see it as much. People have got their rights, and you can't do that to that kid anymore, and all that sort of stuff. So the bullying, it wasn't bullying so much. It was like just a rite of passage
Yes.
that you had to go through. Today would be classed as bullying or your victimization of a kid, but some kids deserve to be roughed up a bit,
Yeah.
They deserve it, and they still deserve it today, but they're protected by the laws and society now, and they get away with it a lot more now than they used to be.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. Did you know what you had later on in life? That do you appreciate those times now?
Oh yeah, for sure. You had lots of good surfs. There wasn't many people in the water. There was an innocence to what we did in those days. We survived in a lot of ways. As you got into your teenage years, there was the partying and the drinking and driving and the sex without condoms, and there's a lot of stuff going on back in the
Freedom and
day.
wildness.
Yeah, like it still goes on today, but people are much more aware about how things are and what the consequences are, where we had no idea. We were just living life,
Yeah.
And it's good, and I work with a lot of young kids still. I work with 10-year-old kids and kids who are teenagers, and they're still great kids, they've just got a different world, if you
Yep.
like, to what we had, especially the ones I work with, the ones who want to go places, want to be better. They're a joy to work with.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, just a different generation, different
Yeah.
upbringing. Yeah.
For sure.
Your son was a pro surfer, Ben.
Yep.
Did you teach him how to surf?
No, he taught himself. He taught
Oh, he
himself
did?
how
Okay.
to surf. Yeah, no, there's no teaching. It was just you give him the opportunity. Back in the day when he was a Grom, he was riding a bodyboard, a boogie board, and so we go to the beach. We lived in a beachside town then. We'd go to the beach and he'd go and ride his boogie board and he'd swim. And, this is when he was about, 4, 5, 6, 7, that sort of age. And I was hesitant to buy him a surfboard because I was a coach and that was my job. I didn't want to be the father that sort of, this is what you're going to do no matter what. So I didn't buy him a surfboard. And then I decided to, I was working with some young guys at the time, and one of them had a board for sale. So I bought it for him. What we did, we'd go to the beach and he'd bring the boogie board and he'd bring the surfboard, and then he'd go swimming and he'd rotate them around, And so he chose what went in the car, For that first year, 18 months, everything went in the car, and then eventually just the surfboard went in the car. And that's all he was doing. So it was just a transition. It was organic in that regard. And then from a teaching him to surf, you just gave him the opportunity to go surfing, and he went surfing. In Ben's case, like all those pro surfers, they're all good natural athletes. My son Ben, he would have been good at something, and just that he was around surfing.
In your generation of surfer, there wasn't a lot of father sons or mother daughter surfing clans, right? It was kind of first generation surfers when you started surfing.
Yeah, pretty well. Yeah, the first generation. In my era, there were guys whose fathers had been surfers.
Okay.
My father had been a lifesaver.
Okay.
And that would have been the case in a lot of my generation. A lot of fathers were lifesavers in the lifesaving movement. That's a big thing in Australia, and it still is. A lot of elite surfers in Australia, coming out of Australia now, started out as a lifesaver, right? But they don't stay there for very long because it's a bit more regimented, and surfers don't like being regimented, So they don't like being told what to do. So those type of personalities don't like being told what to do. They tend to become the surfers out of the life-saving movement.
There you go. But nowadays, you look at the generation, there's multiple generations of surfers. Everyone's
Yep.
kids, dad's teaching them how to surf, or mom's teaching them how to surf, kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And in Australia, we're probably into, generation 3 or 4, something like
Yep.
that. A big part of the reason why women's surfing has got so good is because now young women are now supported to be surfers. Back in the day when I first started coaching, so 40 years ago, I was working with some young girls, and most of the girls were more tomboyish. They were more tomboys, or they were, but they had no support. They just went surfing, like I went surfing back in the day. I went surfing because I really enjoyed it. Those girls did too, but they didn't have the support of their parents like they do now, and they weren't generational support, So now what we've got mothers and fathers of young surfers who are surfers. They support them 100%. They want their kid to enjoy what they enjoyed. So that's a big part of it, what they enjoyed. Then what you've got the ones who are athletic in nature and they want to compete. Well, then that's another level as well, So I think a big part of the women development has been that generational support. And with women surfing, having support is more important than men having support. So that emotional support, they do better with that type of support.
Okay. I was going to ask you why, but you gave the why. So that's cool. And you would know more than me about that too, just because you're in
Sure,
that,
I
you help
work with
them,
I work with a lot of
young ladies
girls
probably.
and surfing mums, and I have heaps of different conversations with heaps of different people.
Is surfing a lifestyle or is it a sport?
Oh, it can be both. Depends on what you want to get out of it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the game of helping surfers become better and helping people understand the sport in a more meaningful way. There's a lot of surfers who couldn't give a rat's about that. They just want to paddle out, they want to catch waves, and
That's
they
right.
want to feel good about it. Because the thing about catching a wave and surfing a wave well is that you get a natural high out of it, and the surf can be really really bad, and you can just get one wave or you can perform one maneuver, and it makes your day.
100%.
And every surfer has experienced that, and so the reality is that a lot of surfers love that. They do it for that reason, and that's all they want out of the sport, or out of what we do as a surfer. And that's the lifestyle side of it, and then and everything goes with that. There's the travel and the the scene.
Right.
You're a surfer and all that stuff. And then there's the other side of the thing, which is the sport, which is people want to do it well. Some people want to do it well because they want to compete. Other people want to do it well because there's a thing called self-actualization,
Mm-hmm.
which is where they just want to be the best they can be. That they may not be. This is probably the free surfer scene. They're out there and they're catching really good waves, but it's really important those guys surf well every day. That's their job. So there's different motivations for
Mm-hmm.
different people, and a lot of people I work with or come across, they're on a journey. They're on a lifetime journey.
100%.
Enjoy their life. I saw something the other day, a quote from a girl who said, "I'm enjoying my surfing, and I want to have a life where I can be a surfer." Whatever that means.
Right.
It just depends on, and there are so many, if you like, so many paths that you can take in the sport. It's unreal.
At least in California, I would say 99% of the people that surf have never surfed a heat in their life.
Yeah, that's fine. And probably the same in Australia.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's probably less in Australia because in Australian culture, we have board rider clubs.
Yes.
Right, and we have board rider clubs, and what happens over here is every major beach in Australia has got a board rider club. Like a town has got a board rider club,
Correct.
or like in Sydney, for instance, say in Manly Beach, there might be 5 board rider clubs on that one beach.
Mm-hmm.
As a surfer in Australia, you probably have surfed heats. If you've joined a board rider club, you definitely have,
Yes.
but not in a competitive sense, like outside your area or whatever. That's a different level competitive surfer again.
Yes.
So there's a hell of a lot of surfers who haven't competed.
Hmm.
But we have got a different mindset because of that club system over here. And yeah, I understand. Like America, California, for instance, they aren't overtly into I want to be a better surfer, and they look for advice. You
Hmm.
know, like in Europe, I go to Europe most years, and I do training camps in Europe because over in Europe, they're okay. Well, I want to be a better surfer. I'll go to a school.
Hmm.
Right. So that and what that means is they'll go to a learn to surf school, or they'll go to another school that has a little bit higher level. Most of my work is helping people who are established surfers, and
Hmm.
they want to be better because they've hit performance barriers in their performance.
Yes.
And a lot of those performance barriers are caused by their technique, because
Hmm.
every maneuver in surfing has got a recognizable technique. If you don't move your body correctly, you're not going to get that consistency or success. Or they make the wrong decisions. A really big part of surfing is making lots of decisions, before and after when you're on a wave. And what Americans don't understand is that one or two changes to a performance can be a revelation,
Hmm.
right? Can be a revelation, and they not only will they feel better about it, they'll look better on a wave, they'll have more success. And it might be simply that for instance, a lot of people get caught in the lip when they do their entries. And a lot of people do that. And the reality is there's just two or three key main, they don't turn their head before they hit the top, or they don't get their front foot above the lip, which gives them more release out of the lip, or they don't have a strong enough bottom turn. One of those three things is the cause, maybe one or two of those things are the cause of why they're getting stuck in the lip. Fix that, opens up a whole new area of a wave where they don't normally go to, and that's really exciting for people.
That's super exciting. Do you ever get hired by a guy that wants to be the top dog at the peak, at the local break?
Well, and they don't state that. they don't they don't state that aim. But yeah, no, I get to work with recreational surfers all the time.
Okay. Okay.
A lot of people send me videos, and I do online consultations.
That's
They
so
send me
cool.
videos, and like yesterday, I was talking to a guy in Nias in Sumatra. He's an
Hmm.
English guy, okay, and he sent me a video, so I'm doing a video review. Another guy sent me a review. Well, the guy in Sumatra was a surf guide, so he was helping other people. So a surf guide coach. So he was improving his skills so he could do better to help other people. And the day before, I was working with a guy who sent me footage from a wave pool in Sydney. Got the wave pool, he sent me the footage. And so we're looking at his speed creation, and we're looking at his bottom turn, we're looking at his turns off the top. A lot of people don't go right to the top of the wave, so they only go two-thirds up the wave. And when you go two-thirds up the wave, you actually can do a turn, but slower because you haven't got as much release.
Yeah.
But there's more board in the water, so you haven't got as much release off the top. So if you drive right to the top, you get a better turn, whatever you do off the top. Things like that. I get that. Anyway, I get videos sent from all over the world
That's
regularly.
cool.
And a lot of these people are just recreational surfers who want to be able to do a better job.
Just self improvement.
Self improvement. That's what it's all about. Yep.
Do you ever look at these videos and realize the guy's on the wrong board?
Um, well, first of all, if you've got good technique, you can ride anything.
True.
Right. Okay.
Almost anything,
But
but yeah.
but
Okay.
but yes, there are occasions when people are riding the wrong board. But most people have got some sort of sense of what they need.
Okay.
But we're not talking about if they're wanting to be elite. Definitely, I talk about it because their board is their surfboard is their stage on which they perform. Right.
Okay.
So they need good equipment. For
Yes.
the recreational surfer, I get asked that a lot about their boards. And if there's no obvious deficiency in their surfing from their boards, I don't really talk too much about it.
Got it. Okay.
I'm not on the ground with them. I say, listen, go and talk to your local shaper. They know your area, they know you, and the
Yep.
like. Yeah, some people get conned in a surf shop. The salesman's just trying to sell them in board. If you build up a relationship with people, they'll give you a good, honest answer, and you can get good advice from experienced people around you in your community. That's important.
Being from the, let's say, would you start surfing in the mid 70s or something like that?
Yeah, early 70s, yep.
Yeah. Was there surf coaching? There wasn't, right?
No, there wasn't, no.
Okay. What light bulb went on in your head saying I could do this, or well, there's a market for this?
As I said, I started when I was about 11 or 12 as a
Yeah.
surfer, and then, I got into my 20s, And I was doing various jobs, surfing, doing various jobs, maybe doing jobs to surf, which is what a lot of surfers do.
Yes.
I ended up in a bank, and a bank for me was soul destroying. So anyway, I decided, I decided to, I decided to go to university. So I went to university and I did a sports science course. Okay, so this sports science course was fundamentally teaching people how to coach people. It was a 2 year course with some other stuff going on. At the end of it, I could have been a gym jockey, like coaching people in the gym. Or I could have been a coach of anything, really, because it gave you a wide breadth of the skills that coaches needed. My major work at university in a subject called biomechanics, which is the science of movement, both from the implement that you used and also from your body, how your body moves and how it should use, and the forces involved. My major work in the biomechanics section was on the biomechanics of a cutback. There's a famous cutback from Storm Riders, a movie that was brought out in probably the 80s. And Storm Riders, and there's a Nias in Indonesia was found, and there was a Thornton Fallender was an Australian surfer, and he comes out of a tube, comes out of a deep tube, and he comes out and he does a big roundhouse cutback with a high rebound off the foam. That's the work I did in that. I analysed it. I looked at the biomechanics of it. I looked at the forces involved and the sequencing of the movement, and I got a high distinction for it because
Yeah.
no one had ever seen anything like that before. That was the catalyst for me to continue. I just loved it. I just found it fascinating to look at surfing in a deeper way, rather than saying, "Oh, that was cool, man," or that was hot, man." It was more about, okay, well, I understand why that was good, and I understand why when I look at other people, when I look at other people and they're not doing it so well, I understand why they're not doing it. And that, again, that was a catalyst. So I decided to start dabbling in it. Bought myself a video, started working with some groms. And then I got the opportunity to move to Sydney. I was up the north coast of New South Wales at the time. I moved to Sydney and I started working with a couple of guys, young guys who wanted to be professional in Sydney. And I started developing my skills from there. And, in those early days, from a surfing perspective, I learned more from them than they learned from me,
I bet. Yeah.
because they were in the competitive scene. I hadn't been a top line competitor, but I knew how to compete, but not at a high level. I was developing my skills of technique and decision making and the things that needed to be there, And so you try things, and if it worked, well, you use it again. If it didn't work, you throw it out and you search for another answer. And in those days, there was no surfing books there was one actually. There was one called a guy by the name of Brian Loudon. He was a sports scientist. He was a scientist in Australia, and he brought out a book. I can't remember Brian's book now, but that was the first thing. The other thing that was done at the time was Ian Cairns brought out a series of videos with Tom Curran.
I remember those. Yeah. Yeah, I remember
Yeah,
that.
there was a series of three of them.
Yep.
And they were really informative. They were good, but they were too long-winded. You'd watch them once, you'd never go back. All respect to Ian, because I know Ian, but they were too long and they were too detailed. So I learned
Okay.
a lot from that, in the fact that if you're going to make something for surfers, you can't make it 3 hours long. They just haven't got the focus to be able to keep it going. So anyway, a lot of experiences there, and there wasn't any money in the day. There wasn't any way of making money. I had to do a lot of traveling. I had to be away from my family. There's a long journey there, and
Yeah.
and now I'm in a comfortable position where I'm very, very fortunate. Well, I've worked really hard too, but I'm in a position where I've worked with a lot of really good surfers in
Yeah.
Australia and over abroad. Right now I'm working with 10-year-old kids. I'm working with surfing mums. I'm working with people online. I'm working with Challenger Series surfers. I've got two girls who I reckon are top line WCT surfers in the future.
Yeah.
They're
I bet.
they're a couple of years away. So all levels, still stimulating, working really, really well. And the thing I really love is looking at the performance and saying, okay, well, what's the next step? What's the next step for that surfer? I've got a good depth of understanding of the sport, and when I look at the surfer, I can see that step, and I can see the journey that they need to take if they want to go to a high level of performance.
Way back when you were learning, I don't know the proper term, but it's like body mechanics or whatever of
Yeah.
surfing and watching it. Did your surfing improve?
Yeah, for sure. more aware of how to do it. It is interesting. It's the thing about improving. It's one thing to have the information. It's another thing to be able to apply it. The problem with a lot of surfers is they know how to train for football or tennis or soccer or swimming, but they don't know how to train for surfing. They've never learned how to train. They just go surfing. Actually, I experienced that with a girl from California. I was working with a girl from California. She was a really good young surfer who had a lot of success in California. And the parents got me to come over, and I did some work with her. The first time she paddled out, I gave her some instruction, and she was supposed to come back in after 6 waves or half an hour, like a duration, so we could have a talk.
Yeah.
She just stayed out there, she just stayed out there. So I didn't worry about it because it's the first time we trained together. The next time I said, oh, listen, I want you to come back in. She didn't come back in again, right? When I'm standing there behind the camera, I'm thinking, you know what? She doesn't know how to train. She doesn't
Right.
know what it takes to actually change a performance. She was a natural athlete. She just knew how to surf. She got better from that experience and
Yeah.
that
The
day-to-day
love of it.
experience. Yeah, the love of it and doing it every day, right? But what happens is if you want to get better, you've got to break your barriers.
Mm.
Right, you got to break your barriers, whatever that barrier is, And to do that, first of all, you got to be aware of what you're doing, what could be put in place to improve that or change that to a better performance. But to do that, actually got to have some focusing strategies, because once you get in the water, what happens is that you get out in the water and then you might focus for the first wave and then you're paddling back out and then someone says, hey, Johnny, see that movie last night? You see that thing on Instagram yesterday, and your focus is gone.
Okay.
It's just out the window. So, but you've got to teach people the focusing strategies that work, and there's a number of them, and not all of them work for the same individual. So you cycle through the different strategies when you work with someone. They can start to get the idea. And the thing you're trying to do is you're trying to get them to have at least one good execution of that thing using that technique. What happens is once they feel the benefit, then they're likely to keep focused on the task. Up until that point, it's like, oh, my coach said that, it's not working, I'm not going to do it, right?
Okay.
But if you can persist with that person and they work on it, then they're more likely to stick to it, and they're more likely to get a better performance long term. Getting back to what with me, I didn't know that when I was doing that early in my coaching. I didn't improve to the extent that I could have because I didn't really have the focusing strategies in place. Now, after 40 years of doing what I do, I've got good focusing strategies,
Yes.
and I can explain them to the people I work with.
So you start this business that doesn't really exist. You're inventing this business, kind of. Is that
Yeah,
proper?
pretty well.
Okay. Was it hard to find the clients? Was it like, who did you look at? The pro surfers, the amateur, the board riders clubs? Or where were you going for your clients?
When I first started, what I did was, because I'd been to the university, I put together a seminar, a club seminar. So what I did was I offered it to clubs, and fortunately for me, a couple of clubs up and down the coast said, yeah, we'll have that, we'll try that. So I went in and I did like a 3-hour seminar to the club, and I'd be talking to maybe 50, 60 people, maybe more. Oh, and that's interesting. That sounds good. Anyway, so I did that, and then out of that, I got a couple of good young surfers who I started to work with. I had another job at the same time, but because I couldn't, my wife was working, I was working, so it was a real part-time thing to start with. But
Yeah.
most of my free time was all about this game that I was trying to create, right? Because I was into it big time. And so I did that, but it's funny. Out of that too, I got offered of other opportunities because I put myself out there. I got offered a job. I got offered to go up to G-Land. There used to be a mob called the Surfers Medical Association, and it was
Okay.
started by a guy from California. I can't remember his name now, but a doctor. They're all doctors or nurses or physios or whatever. They're all surfers and there's all community, but there's a big tax dodge as well. You could go to G-Land or you could go to Tavarua and have a little conference and
Yeah.
surf your brains out and whatever. Anyway, these doctors, they're not dumb.
Yeah.
Anyway, they invited me up to G-Land for their first conference. And that came from that seminar I did to a board rider club in Sydney. And so I went up there and I presented on technique and developing surfers. And this is really new, this is back in 91. I started coaching in probably 87, 86. So this
Okay.
is only 3 or 4 years, 5 years into my thing. And so I was up there presenting, which I'm very comfortable doing, presenting at any level of surfing. In G-Land, I was in the prime of my surfing too, so I was having a good time as well. But
Yeah.
again, it's all about doing these things and then putting yourself out there and doing professional work, and then people like what you do. I've got to tell you, in 40 years, and I've coached thousands and thousands of surfers over here, I've had one complaint in 40 years,
Wow.
right?
Okay.
Because I work really hard to make sure I give good advice. I'm thorough. I turn up on time. Just the things that you've got to do as a professional person.
Yeah.
Talking about early days, people used to look at me and go, "What? You're a surf coach?" And it probably took me 15 years before I actually started publicly saying that. That was my job,
Hmm.
because there was this bent about what's that, like what the response I'd have in America if I went to California. I've often thought about going to California and doing a seminar tour, and I
Yeah.
spoke to PT about that, actually,
Hmm.
Peter Townend, about that one
Yeah.
time, because I think the Americans need to be educated. You know,
Yeah.
there's all these people who are out there spending all this money on surfing. How are they going to be a better surfer? I'll go and buy a new board.
Right.
I'll go for a surf trip down to Costa Rica and I'll go and surf my brains out. I'll become a better surfer. They will, but they won't, because their fundamentals are still incorrect. They haven't got the fundamentals under control, and the same errors they make on that last board, they'll make on this board here too. I'm really big in that, and I've got a lot of stuff on my website. And a
Yes.
big aim of it is to help people understand the sport in a more meaningful way.
So that's esurfer.com.
That's it. But like the early days, it wasn't easy. It wasn't
It,
easy, you
it
know.
was not. But now everyone has a surf coach, it seems like.
Well, that's true. Everyone does have a surf coach. Well, all the ones who are competing have a surf coach,
100%. That's what I
right?
meant.
Yeah, and I just got offered the job up in China to go up there full time. I'm not going to take the job, but I've got offered the job. China putting a lot of money into developing surfers, you know,
Yes.
and
Well,
um, and so they're looking for coaches from around the world, but there's different levels of coaching. You know what I mean?
yes.
There's coaches that the ex pros are really good at competition strategy, and
Hmm.
they're really good at talking about board, but they're hopeless on developing technique and decision
Okay.
making.
You're more on the decision making and technique and all that.
I'm really good at developing talent. So,
Oh,
if
there you
you've
go.
got a 10 to 14-year-old kid, I'm really good at that. And I'm really good at changing established surfers and changing their technique, their way of surfing so that they can have a better performance. I get a lot of work from Japanese professional surfers because in Japan they have coaching and they have coaches up there and that. But a lot of them haven't got the technical understanding. The surfers are found out in a competition sense because they've got good strategies and the like, but they can't get the scores.
Hmm.
And the scores are determined by the quality of their maneuvers, which is a technical thing, or their decision making on the wave. So how they put their maneuvers together. Like decision making is if you've got a surfer and they surf well, and you start working the decision making area, you can take that surfer from a 6 point average per wave competition surfer to an 8 point average surfer just by
Which is
changing their
huge.
decisions, which is huge. I talk to these people about half points. Every half
Yeah.
point you can get, the better. And I,
Right.
and I say, well, how many times do you lose by half a point? Right. And they go, oh, so many times. Well, that's what we're talking about. We're trying to build them bit by, it's like building a $6 million man.
There you go.
You're building them bit by bit, by bit, by bit. People stick around, well, then they can reach their potential. What happens with a lot of coaching around the world now, they just haven't done any of the grunt work, a lot of these coaches. There's surfers who said, I'm a coach. They haven't looked deeply enough into the sport. Again, getting to that, what's that surfer's next step? A lot of coaches haven't got that. I was in Sydney just recently, and one of the main coaches in Sydney said to the surfer, I just to go out there and hit it higher, right? Meaning, do a re-entry
Harder.
high, right? But how high is high? You know,
Hmm.
how do I achieve being going high? Like they haven't got the specifics. Most
Hmm.
coaches around the world haven't got the specifics, which a person needs to actually have the focus to then go and do that skill in a consistent and successful way. I talk about, okay, where you're looking. Well, I want you to turn your head. But I don't do that. I say, okay, I want you to look to the 6 o'clock position, which is straight down, or
Hmm.
back to the 5 o'clock position, or specifics. And then you go, okay, well, you're trying to clone them. No, I'm not trying to clone people. What I'm trying to do is make them successful, right? And these little nuances and these little focus points can help people go from not being able to do a skill to actually being able to do a skill. Most coaches don't do that.
I would think I would agree with you.
Well, again, well, I know because I travel the world
You,
and I see coaches
yeah.
close up. You
No,
know,
it's. I'm trying to process what you're saying,
well,
and I
see, the
think
other
you're
thing
right.
too is that a lot of people they go on YouTube and they learn they see what YouTube talks
Offers.
about, and
Yeah.
a lot of that's just crap. Yeah, again, and what it does, and if it's any good stuff, what they can't do help someone stay focused on task in the water. So
Okay.
that's not being explained. They're saying, okay, we'll do it this way, but then there's no the next step. What's the next step to make that in your surfing? And so people don't. And then what happens to people when they try and try and try to do something, they can't get it, they don't do it anymore, right?
True.
There's an
They're
aversion to.
frustrated.
They're frustrated. I'm not going. I'm not going to do that again. For no funny falling off doing that maneuver. So anyway, I'm trying to make a living, but a big part of my motivation is to help people understand why surfing should be done a certain way. And again, it's not cloning because what we try and do is be successful. And everyone's different because they've got different styles.
Hmm.
They've got different body shapes. They've got different, their body moves in different sequences, if you like,
Yes.
or, but the speed of doing the turn, whatever. So you can have a stylish surfer who is excellent with their technique, and then you can have a stylish surfer who's really poor in their technique, but they still look all right. So it depends on your motivation, what you want to do, what you
Yeah.
want to achieve.
So if you're coaching with somebody, and let's say you're coaching a group of four guys, and you got some guy that's 6'4", and you got some guy that's 5'4", and they're different body shapes, of course. How would you approach that?
Yeah, fundamentally the same, except that you got to understand that the tall guy struggles to bend his body. There's some limitations to the way he bends his body, and so you got to be aware of that, and you've got to be aware of their likelihood that they're not going to be able to make some maneuvers easily because of that fact. Because some maneuvers require you to get nice and low and bend, compress low on landing and things like that. But fundamentally, no, you're talking about the same things. The body
Okay.
movement of the maneuvers is fundamentally the same for everyone.
Cool.
Again, and people can learn it. They're interested and they want to work on their surfing. There's ways that you can become better. Those who are motivated, you're not stuck in your world right now. If you want to be better, there's ways you can improve.
Do you watch WSL today?
Yeah, I do. I watch that because that gives me an understanding of what the level is. There's some people I like more than others. There's some people who do a better job more than others. The WSL, I like the strategic side of it because that's a huge part of learning to surf is one thing, learning to compete is a different skill altogether.
Hmm.
If you like, they're two different streams. You can train them together, but you've got to do specific stuff in the strategic side of things. And I'm known as a technical coach, but I'm happy to work in the competition environment as well. Because strategy and all that stuff, that's stuff I've been doing for 30 years,
Okay.
not
Yeah.
not
When you're
40.
watching WSL, do you see pro surfers, the top guys, let's say on the CT, that could use your help?
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay.
One thing I'm really big on, and I spoke to Jesse Miley Dyer about it a couple of years ago. Sometimes the commentators on the WSL get it wrong.
Okay.
They're just surfers and they've got plenty of experience. From a technical point of view, they say, "Oh, he did this wrong." Like technically, they're pretty poor. So I think they need to be educated in that regard. They need to know and they should have a common language with the population.
Okay.
We call snaps over here something, they call them re-entries over there. And as a sport, we should have a common language. And the WSL doesn't help that in a lot of ways. They're probably big enough to say, well, we're going to call it that because that's what we believe it is. And they've got a responsibility to the sport to actually educate the sport as they're going along. And often they don't do a good job in that regard. So, I take notice of that stuff.
That's kind of a good point. Never thought of it, to be honest with you. That's kind of fascinating.
When I started working with a surfer, a big part of it is to teach them, how to be better at what they do. But we're also communicating. It's a communication thing going on, and
Hmm.
so I'm really big on trying to help them understand the sport. We talk the same language. So if I talk about a lip line, they know what a lip line is. If I talk about a fin bust, they know exactly what a fin bust is. If I talk about speed creation, they know exactly what that looks like and what that is and what they should do. There's different terms and different ways of describing the sport that makes it easier for me in my job and makes it easier for them to understand and get the most out of the training sessions that we do together.
Yeah, what you've done sounds fascinating, and I'm glad you've helped probably thousands and thousands of surfers.
Yep. I've had the internet presence for a long time too.
Yeah.
Like that esurfr.com site is my fourth website.
Hmm.
I used to have one called surfcoach.com. I sold that to Surfing Australia. They didn't do
Hmm.
much with it. It sort of went into the ether.
Okay.
I came back and I did martindunn.com.au. They're both membership sites, and my new site, esurfr.com, is a membership site. In the back
Got it.
of that site, which is only $4.95 a month,
Hmm.
like less than a cup of coffee, or
Yep.
less than a gallon of fuel in America right now, anyway,
Oh, yeah, way
probably.
less. Way
So
less.
the thing about that, I've got 500 videos in there. I've made them all. I've got 500 videos on right through decision making, competition, technique, fin bus, aerials, everything. People, they don't see the value in that. They don't see the value in that they can self instruct and they can get benefit from it.
Yeah, there's a certain point where if you're making the same mistake over and over, you never correct it. You're taking the luxury of life away, kind of almost like if you can't improve. Say.
Well, you can improve. Like, there's a guy over in Australia here. He started sending me videos for review maybe 3 years ago, and he sent me about 8 or 10 videos over 3 years. I've never met him. I've never seen him on, like, I do a video remotely like with this guy, or via Zoom where I'm talking to the person face to face.
Yeah.
Right. This guy, over a 3 year period, he's gone from every wave he was falling off to doing fin bass and not doing aerials yet, but he's doing, and so he's in his 40s, and
Hmm.
but he's on a journey. He's not a competitive surfer.
Yeah.
He goes up to he goes up the Mentawais, he goes up the Maldives, he does those surf trips. I figure he must have a bit of money because
Yeah.
he's sort of going on these good trips, and he's got no problems paying me for my reviews. That type of guy is the guy that, and I know there's a million of them out there, right?
Hmm.
Because everyone wants to be a better server. Everyone. I worked for a company called Hot Tuna before when I was
Yep.
learning my coach and my training as a coach. I worked as a full-time job and the coach as a part-time thing at Hot Tuna. And Hot Tuna, they got a bit of advertising material from Surfer magazine. They were big advertisers around the world at the time. One of the stats that they have, like how many people read it and all this sort of stuff, and this is to get you to advertise more with Surfer magazine. One of the things was that if they have a how-to section, 90%, over 90+% of people read that article. Now
Yep.
that was back in the late 80s,
I remember him
right?
vividly.
Yeah, right. I looked at that as a developing coach, like there's no coaching going on. I looked at it and go, see that? Everyone wants to be a better surfer because
Yes.
they're reading the stuff.
Yeah.
And so I thought, that was another conviction for me. I know that the market is there. But what happens with most surfers is they don't want to be seen to be looking for advice.
Okay.
Like, it's not cool. It's not
Yeah.
cool to be, right? That's the deal.
Yeah. But going back to how we started this is I was saying if they're frustrated and they're not getting help and they're not improving, it's frustrating. Is what my point was. They need someone like you or you to help them improve life. Their surfing life.
Well, without a doubt, well, you can take it to that extent, and without a doubt, the biggest thing that happens is people who actually work on their surfing and they get better. They come out of the water and their peers or someone says, "Hey, that was a great wave."
Oh yeah.
That's their
Reward.
reward. They're
Yes.
not looking for any. These people aren't looking for winning contests or anything else.
They're not looking
They
for
just
the bell.
no, they're not looking for the bell, right? Yeah, but the thing is that's what happens. If people commit to becoming a better surfer and they get good advice and they can stay focused on task, There's a couple of things they've got to jump over to get to where they're going. But then what happens is they start getting comments in the water. They start getting comments. They start getting better waves in the water because people actually give them a little bit more space because
Right.
they're a better surfer. Everything actually just improves as a result of this. On the reverse of that is, okay, I stay the same. I'm still frustrated. But again, I'm not prepared to work on it. So, well, I am. I'll go and watch all the YouTube videos, but they don't help.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't help because they don't give the information. Some of them they give the information, they don't give the explanation of actually how to make it happen. They don't go to
There you
that
go.
next step. That's
Yeah.
that's the thing.
Yeah. Martin, I love what you're saying. I think everyone, no matter what age bracket, could use improvement. I mean, I know I could. I know we all can.
Sure.
Definitely use some help.
Yeah. No, I'm actually going to Hawaii next week. I'm doing 2 training camps in the North Shore of Hawaii, and
Nice.
these people are recreational surfers. No competition surfers. I've got a 68-year-old. I've got a 50-year-old. I've got a 32-year-old woman. I've got these are people who have seen my work online
Mm-hmm.
and coming to see what happens in real life. But
Okay.
the reality is, I'm really happy to work with them just as much as I work with a WCT surfer. In actual fact, you get more feedback from the recreational surfer than you do the pony show at the top.
Yeah. Well,
You know
peer
what I mean?
pressure means a lot. If you're getting
Without
acceptance
doubt.
from your peers in the water, the guys you see 3 days a week, it means a lot to them.
Sure. And the bottom line is that you feel better because you can feel it, the benefit in the water.
Right. I have to ask you, and maybe you don't have the information for this. You brought up being offered a job in China.
Yep.
In some ways, I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, I feel like China's pushing on surfing, like almost making surfers happen, which, like, in our lifetime, we wanted to surf, so we surfed. Does that
Sure.
make sense? Do you feel like the same with China?
Oh, that's exactly what's happening in China.
Okay.
What they do in China, it was told to me last weekend by the guy who organises these jobs in China. He said to me, he said, what happens in China is at 7 years of age, everyone in China is tested for their
Evaluated.
aptitude, right? At a certain age, they get sent to a sports school if they've got some talent. And so there's a Chinese surfer right now who's doing really well. This girl,
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the name,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Chi or something, right?
Yes.
She was targeted and she was sent to a gymnastics school. She didn't make the grade.
Mm.
So what they did was they sent her to a sailing school, academy.
Yeah.
She didn't make the grade there either,
Mm.
right? Then the third one they sent her to the surfing. My understanding is she just took onto it and has been highly successful since,
Yes.
right? The thing is, if she didn't do well in surfing, she would have been sent back to the middle of China. She comes from the middle of China, no ocean.
Yes.
And that would have been the last anyone that would have ever heard of her,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's exactly what's happening. The problem for the Chinese, my understanding is what they're doing a lot of surfing in other parts of the world except for China. They've got some surfing happening in China. They've got a training base at Ryu Bay in Hainan Island, and they've
Mm-hmm.
actually built them a surf pool there. Like
Nice.
I can't remember which one, but
Yeah.
a fully fledged $20 million pool, and they've got that facility there, right? They go to Australia, they go to Indo, they go Philippines, they go to all these other places. They're not doing a good job for themselves there because they're going out and they've got no etiquette, right? And they're paddling out. And my understanding is that in Indo, they're actually now paying the locals so that they can surf. So they're
I've heard
giving
this.
cash money. So they're making it happen, and they're making it happen because, well, again, this is a cultural thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, us in Australia and you in America, we speak the same language, but we're not the same people. We have
No.
different culture, we have different ideas, and we have different things. Well, when you go and work in other cultures, like in China, for instance, their culture is totally different,
Right.
right? I've worked with the Japanese, with high level Japanese surfers. I've been to Peru, working in Peru. I've done a lot of work in Peru,
Mm-hmm.
all right. And so each time you go to a different culture, you've actually got to work in there in those confines of that culture. But you've got to
Definitely.
understand the culture before you start doing meaningful work. China is going about it a little bit wrong. They're putting
Mm-hmm.
lots of money in. And I think that's probably a good thing for people in my profession because there's a lot of people working up there right now. but there's still a lot more to learn. Actually, what they're doing is actually they're employing ex-pro surfers and they're employing a lot of judges up there.
Mm-hmm.
Those people aren't necessarily the right people in the fact that they aren't developmental coaches,
Yeah.
and what they need is developmental coaches.
Yeah. And I think if I can recall from years and years ago, in probably the 90s, I think PT was actually the first like Chinese coach.
Yeah, that's right. PT was, yeah, yeah. He was. I know PT pretty well, and he was telling me a few stories from up there. It's
Yeah.
yeah, no, he was a bit of a pioneer in that regard, and obviously it's a financial thing for him to do, and
Yeah.
he's a businessman, so good on him. He went up there, and but
100%.
I think it's a pretty tough task up there culturally. It's a bit of culture shock goes on up in there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if they're going to accept what the surfers of the world say, the Chinese. They have their own take on it.
Well, yeah, well, probably the surfers of the world will actually start to get them to conform.
They should,
You
as
know,
they should.
yeah, well, yeah, it's like the grommet paddling out for the first day in the local break. They're going to get a bit of grommet abuse,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
and I think that's what's happening to the Chinese surfers as they go around the world. And the system says they've got to do it a certain way, and they've got to train and do the like. As time goes on, that'll to soften. Well, the surfers will soften as they get away from their peers because they won't be able to operate in an effective way in a local environment in the water. They
In the lineup.
just cop it.
Yeah. Because the young lady from China fell into surfing kind of on accident because she
Yep.
failed at other things.
Yep.
It sounds like she might love surfing, but if you're forced to surf, do you love it? Do you think? I mean, it's just an opinion, I guess. I'm saying no. What's your thoughts?
If you're forced to surf, well, see, it's their job. It's their job. They get paid to do it,
Okay.
right? That's
We
their
all have
job.
jobs we hate.
Yeah,
right?
well, that's true too. But yeah, they may not like it, and again, that'll come back down to the individual. But I saw them in Bells last week, Bells Beach in Australia. I was down there coaching some the Victorian team, and
Mm-hmm.
and they were in the water, every day, and they didn't seem to have any problem paddling out. So I
Okay.
don't think there was a hate going on. It's like any day. Some days you just don't feel like it. In China, I think even if you don't feel like it, you still got to do it. There's that thing going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
You've written a couple articles for the Inertia. How did that come about?
From memory, I was working in Peru. I met one of the guys down there. What happened? Australia opened up the high performance centre just south of Snapper Rocks. I was contracted as the head coach there for the first 3 years it was open. And then I left for various reasons. But 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from Peru. And because I'd been the Australian coach, I was the Australian coach like at 12 world titles or whatever it was.
Yes.
Peru heard that I'd left serving Australia. So they rang up and said, "You want to come to Peru?" And I go, "Oh, yeah, sure. Why not?"
Yeah, why not?
Why not? So I went to Peru and I went there and I coached their national team and 3 or 4 occasions, and then I went back there a number of times working with smaller groups of surfers. Yeah, so again, this cultural thing, I love Peru and I love the people of Peru and the cuisine. I'll tell you, I go there just for the food. The food's sensational. Anyway, so when you're going around those higher levels of the sport, you meet people, you get to know people and stuff,
Yep.
and most of the stuff goes to the pros and the ex-pros, and
Yeah.
people like me who've done the grunt work, we don't always get the recognition we not require, but it's more about that you're not always valued for what you can do for people,
Yeah.
Yeah, like for instance, the Filipino boys, they're coached by Tommy Whitaker.
Yes.
Well, I was Tommy Whitaker's coach for about 4 years when he was
Yes.
a grommet, right?
He's a good surfer.
And
He's a great
yeah. Tommy's a great guy.
Yeah, I bet.
He's a really good guy. So most of the coaches from Australia, I've coached, and they've been on the other side. I suppose the good thing about that has been that they saw coaching as something that was a worthwhile occupation just from the experiences with me and what I did with them. I suppose that's from a long-term point of view. I'm trying to deliver a message out there. Say you can be a better surfer if you want to be a better surfer, but if you go to the wrong person, you won't be.
Do you ever do like seminars or anything for the coaches to help other surf coaches out.
Yeah, No. Well, I actually wrote a 3-volume curriculum that's on my website
That's what I thought.
that
Yeah. Okay.
I started, did last year. And I've got a 2-day seminar on evaluating surfing performance, which I presented last year. And it's likely I'm going to be doing it in Portugal later in the year. They're the sort of things I could bring to America and things like that. They would be good for the American system because they actually start to look at surfing in a more meaningful way. Quickly, there's a lot of surfers out there who are really good, but they got things missing in their performance, right? Like there's a guy on the tour now, Connor O'Leary,
Yes.
right? And I worked with
Love
Connor.
Connor. Right.
I was Connor's coach for all through his junior career into his CT career. And someone like Connor O'Leary, without good instruction, he would never have got to the level he's at.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
Like a good athlete, wanted to do well, but lots of things were going wrong in his surfing. There's a lot of surfers out there. Everyone on the Challenger series, on the QS, they've all got issues in their surfing, and
Yeah.
so they haven't got the total package. They need to have their performance reviewed from top to bottom to say, okay, well that can be improved or that can't be improved, and a lot of people aren't getting that done, so they'll never make the top level.
Yeah.
They're trying, but they'll never get there because how they're going to get better is they go and they get better boards from their shapers. They
Yeah.
go into the gym and they do lots of gym work, but they don't do a lot of specific work in the ocean. They just
Right.
surf. They
And that's
don't
why
train.
you're here on Earth, to help them do that.
Well, I'm definitely. Well, I've done that a lot.
Yes,
I've
you
done that a
have.
lot,
Yeah.
and I'm expressing that they should actually think about that as being important if they want to make a career.
Yeah. And I listened to some of these pros, and I feel like what you're saying is correct. Yeah.
Well, I've been fortunate enough that my son was a pro surfer.
100%. Yeah.
He was on the CT for 4 years.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
saw.
I've coached over 30 people who have made the WCT.
Yeah.
So
No.
I
You're in the shit.
understand that. I understand that level. I understand what it takes to get to that level.
100%.
So that's the issue. There's all these people. They're going to be the next Kelly Slater or the next Chris Moore or whatever they are. They're pretty special people, But you can help them bit by bit. Get that extra half a point now, half a point there. The reality is, a lot of times, what happens if they're a competitive surfer, what happens in a competition, they'll paddle out and they'll be in a heat where there's 4 people in the heat who could win the event.
Right.
Right, they're one of them, right? And so it's a tough heat, and it's usually about the second or third round, and they paddle out. Everyone gets a good score, half a point between the 4 of them. They're the heats you actually have to get through.
Yeah.
They're the heats you actually have to consistently get through to actually get to the big time. If you can get through that heat on a consistent basis, well, what happens is that if you get through those type of heats, the competition opens up and you're more likely to be a finalist because you got through that particular heat, that tough heat, right?
Right.
Anyway, long story short, if you can develop your skills that you're getting those extra half a points to get through those type of heats, you're likely to actually do something in the sport.
Yes. Well, Martin Dunn, thank you so much for coming on the QuiverCast. I have one last question, and I don't know if you can answer this, but I have to know, with all your experiences, so many years of coaching, who's the closest of all generations, by the way, and everyone's got to consider that generation might surf different than they do today. Who's the best all-around style or mechanics or whatever surfer in the world? Has there been one?
Well, Kelly Slater was the best.
Okay, straight out. Got it.
Kelly Slater was, well, not only from a mechanical point of view, but for everything.
Okay.
Kelly is without peer. Right now, currently, I think Colapino and Medina.
Okay. And that's funny you said that because they both surf differently. It's kind of funny, but yeah.
Yeah, they're both great what they do, and technically they're really good, but they're also strategically they're very good.
Okay.
They're the 2 guys I would put up
Your money
there
on?
in a pool of very, very talented people.
Yes, a lot of talent. So you're saying, and now I'm going to put you on the spot, and maybe I'm putting words in your mouth. Those are the most likely candidates at the end of the year to be world champ.
No, I'm not saying that.
Oh, you're not saying that. All right.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying because there's all these other things that come into play, but definitely
True.
they've got the ability to They've
Yes.
got the ability on any day to be unbeatable, but
Yes.
sometimes they do get beaten.
That's the thing about surfing, right? There's
Yeah,
no
without
perfect.
doubt.
Everyone loses, no matter who you are. Even Kelly.
Well, everyone's got the potential to win too. Like
100%. Yeah.
and winning is not a winning contest. Winning is making that finish that you've never made before, or doing a roundhouse cutback where you've actually hit the foam and you've never done that before and being successful. That's winning.
And
And for a lot of people, that's just as important.
I'm serious. This is truthful. In the very beginning of the interview, you said it might just be like you hit it hard or whatever,
Yep.
That's how my surfing days are today. If I get a
Yep.
good turn or I
Yep.
do a good cutback, like you said, just that one little nugget of a wave,
Yeah.
the rest of the wave can be shitty. I am
Yeah.
so stoked. I'm a lot of times it's like, all right, I'm going to wrap it up now. I don't want to go because one more kind of ruins it for me. But that's just
Yeah,
me.
and you got bragging rights then too.
Right. Especially if people on the beach see you. You can just come in and like, all right, cool. So that's what happens. But you know what? I still love the surfing, so that's good.
Yeah, good on you.
And then are you still getting in the water?
No, I haven't. I haven't been in the water for a while.
Okay.
I've got a bad back. I struggle getting
Okay.
my feet.
I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's fine. That's a typical old surfer.
Yeah.
But I'm surfing every day in my mind, and I'm talking about surfing. I'm involved, and so I'm quite comfortable with what I'm doing right now.
Yes. And it sounds like you still love it. You still have a passion for it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, actually, I'm producing my first app right now.
Okay.
I've got an app for surfing. I've been sitting it for 20 years. It'll be out in about 2 months' time,
Nice.
and it'll be good for the sport.
I'm so excited. So everybody make sure you go and check out esurfer.com, right? And Martin Dunn.
got to be particular about eSurf R, not eSurf.
Yeah, esurfr.com. And I will put that on the show notes so everyone has
Okay,
the correct
great.
address.
Thank you very much, Mike. Thanks
No
very much.
problem. So everybody, this is Mike and Martin Dunn, and we are out of here. Thank you,
go
Martin.
left,
Thanks,
I
Mike.
go right. Man, this wave is out of sight. Going surfing. Going surfing. Going surfing with friends. Ride this wave to the shore. Paddle out, I'm gonna catch 10 more. Going surfing. Going surfing. Going surfing with friends. I don't care if it's wrong or right. I'm gonna do it all day. I'm gonna do it all night. I'm going surfing. Going surfing. Going surfing with friends. Watching up on my way. It's a beautiful day. I'm going surfing. I'm going surfing. Going surfing